So round two, I can't get my video to upload to my phone or to my computer. I'm gonna do it on my phone and see if I can do it this way. So, this is a video about buying a house at a young age. So my fiance and I are 21 and 22, but when we bought our house, it was May of 2020, and I was 20 years old and he was 21. And we basically decided that we wanted a house after we had been together, I think, like 3 or 4 months. We got engaged after 6 months of dating. We bought this house a little over a year after we started dating. This house, little backstory I may as well put in, is it was built in 1794. It's one of the oldest houses in the town that we live in. First thing that I wanted to address, don't go for like the first house that you find, because more often than not that house is gonna have issues. Like, we got sucked into just wanting to find a house and we wanted to get out of the place that we were in, so we looked at a couple of houses that in hindsight we're really happy we didn't get. We were kind of just thinking about, you know, not wanting the house that we were in, not wanting to live there anymore, so we didn't really care and we just wanted to get out of there. But when you decide to buy a house, you need to think about where you want to go and how much you can spend and what kind of house is actually going to make you happy, that house checks at least most of your boxes, because a mortgage is, you know, in most cases 30 years, and this video is kind of for the people that they're not going to be able to just pay off the house or just buy a house. So you're gonna have to mortgage the property and pay every month for this house, so you should make sure that it's a house that you want and a house that you like. Make sure it's a house that you see yourself in 30 years from now, or, you know, at least 10 years down the road. Make sure it's a house that you see kids growing up in, going to fit your needs in the long run, not just right now. Make sure that it's a house that is going to make you happy for, you know, a long time. Not many people can say that they bought a house before they turned 21, or, you know, before they turned 22, which is, in our case, we were 20 and 21 when we closed on the place that we live in. First of all, we decided that we wanted a house. Obviously, really know where to start. Like, we've never looked for a house. Neither of us have ever even like rented, and we decided not to rent. We kind of looked into it, but renting, actually, around where we live, I don't know if it's normal for everywhere, but where we live, renting is more expensive than just paying a monthly mortgage. So we chose to look into buying. Now, obviously, at first we didn't really know how to do that, or like if we even could do it, but we figured we would try. The first house that we looked at, it was like literally within 2 miles of the house that we were living in, and we really liked it. Like, the house itself was really nice, but we learned quickly that we also need to think about, you know, where the house is and what the house has for property. Now, a lot of people don't really care about property, but in our case, I have 2 horses. Now, when we started looking and we were gonna buy a house, I only had 1 horse, but I have 2 now, and when we started looking, we kind of just, honestly, I kind of just like put the horse on the back burner as far as like how important it would be to be able to have my horse at home. Now, I knew that I wanted my horse at home because boarding is really expensive. That was an expense that I kind of wanted to cut out. Being able to find a place with property was really important. We also have dogs, and our dogs need space to run, and we didn't want to have to send them to doggy daycare, so we wanted to find a place where we could fence in our yard. And like I said before, we didn't really pay that much attention to those factors. We kind of just were like, oh yeah, we just want a house. Let's just get a house. But that's why I'm making this video, so that I can like make like a checklist of things that people should think about when they're getting a house. Like, don't go for the first house you see, because it's probably not going to check off all your boxes. Make sure you have a list of priorities, that, you know, you have must-haves for the house, and not just the house, the property too. So do you need land? Do you want to have, you know, more than one bathroom? Or how many rooms do you need? Because how many kids are you planning to have? You know, like, you might be thinking in the future you're going to have kids, so how many rooms do you need? Or like in my case, I have horses, so how much space do I need for the horses, and what kind of land do you want? Because if it's going to be rocky, or it's muddy, or it's uneven, that might play into it. Like, I preferably would want flat land so I could have an arena. So those are things that you have to think about for your pets and the future, and what's going to make you happy in the long run. So make sure that you don't just pick the first house because you just want a house. And now, you know, sometimes people will find the right house on the first try, but that does not generally happen. So make sure that you really look into it and make sure that it's the house that you want. Don't go for a house just because it's in your budget either, or just because you think it's all you can afford. There are other options other than just getting a bank mortgage. So what we did was, our issue, that like the biggest thing that we ran into, was we couldn't get a bank mortgage because we didn't have a long enough credit history. So the bank required at least 2 years of credit history for both of us, and the both of us had about a year and a half each. So we really only needed 6 more months of credit history, and then we would have actually been qualified for the loan for the house that we chose. But then we ran into other issues. So I'll go into those issues in a minute. But so basically, don't get all freaked out or discouraged if a bank won't work with you. There are other options. I don't necessarily recommend going through an online service, because we did try that, and honestly, it was just really untrustworthy for us. So I'm not gonna recommend that to anybody, honestly. But if you know people that have had success with it, then by all means you try it out, because we did not have a great experience with an online mortgage company. Just not trustworthy, and we wouldn't do it again, basically. But what we did have success with was the house that we chose was being sold by the owner. So there was no real estate agent, there was no middleman, there was no third party that we had to go through. So we actually connected straight to the owner of the house at the time, and we did all of our business through him. Now, obviously, we had to get a lawyer, and we had to do closing costs and all of that, but we worked straight with the seller of the house. We did not work with an agency or like brokerage or anything. It was just the person that was selling the house. And I liked that because we could talk directly to him about the home. Now, he never actually lived here. He bought it, and he was going to demolish it and just sell it as land, because he had kind of the same idea as us when we first saw the place online. It's built in 1794, potentially in bad shape, you know? It ended up not being in as bad a shape as he thought when he first bought it, so he kept it and decided to sell it as is, and we bought it as is. Now, the thing is, is because we couldn't get a bank mortgage and we couldn't just buy the house. Like, we couldn't just pay cash. Again, being young, we don't have the money on hand for that. We don't have the savings for that. We, are just barely, starting up our careers. We kind of got discouraged a little bit, and, I messaged the seller of this house multiple times. I texted him multiple times, like, letting him know where we were at trying to get a mortgage. And I, told him why we didn't get the mortgage, with the bank, because I wanted him to just know, like, it has nothing to do with us not having the money or us not having the income or not having, the credit scores. It was simply that we didn't have enough credit history. Took that into consideration and offered us a plan so that we could pay him. He would hold the mortgage for us for 5 years, and we would pay him our mortgage every month. And then, so at the end of 5 years, we have to get a bank mortgage, which is going to be pretty totally doable, we think. I mean, there's certain things that the house needs, but because the house also has to be qualified for the mortgage. But at this point, we would qualify for the mortgage because we have those 6 months now of credit history since moving in here. But we just need to get the house ready for the bank mortgage. We have just over 4 years to do that now. We've been here for about 7 months, almost, I think 8 months, almost. Well on our way. But we just have like renovations and things that go into it before the house is ready for a bank mortgage. So that's what we're working on for the next 4 years. Hopefully we can get it done sooner. Before we got the house, we kind of, I think, being young, were looked at like by multiple people and, multiple sellers and things like, oh, well, you obviously don't know anything and you are not going to be able to buy a house because you're too young. Or they looked at us and just automatically figured you don't have the money for that, or, certain things, because, we have to come up with closing, like down payment, closing costs, and things like that. And then with a house, other things are going to pop up, and they have. And, sometimes it's a struggle, but we make it work, and it's worth it because we have our own place, and it's a really nice house, and it's not too far from our work, and, so it checks our boxes. I can have my horses here, we can have the dogs here, we can have cats. I'm a big advocate, too, for buying as opposed to selling, just because if you can buy a house around here, like I said earlier, it is honestly, once you get past your closing costs and lawyer fees and down payment, it's just as expensive, if not less expensive, than renting. And you actually have something to show for it. You can do anything you want. You can tear down the walls, you can, do whatever you want. You can paint however you want. It's yours. You can make it your own. If there's not enough bathrooms, you can add a bathroom. Or you want a bathtub, but there's no bathtub, you can put a bathtub in. You can change whatever you want and do whatever you want. You can have as many pets as you want. You do whatever you want for your property. Like, I went out and I built my pasture. We have a shed that wasn't there before, and now it's there for my horses. So, we couldn't have done that if we had been renting. We couldn't change the color of the walls or tear down walls and build walls and, do whatever we want. So that's like a really big deal. I mean, a lot of people are perfectly comfortable renting, and if you're one of those people, by all means, go for it. But it just wasn't our thing. We like to have something to show for, all the money that we've put into it. So, so buying was just a really good option for us. It was difficult, but we made it work, and we're really grateful for being able to do that when we're financing and to be able to have the house despite not having the credit history that we needed for the bank. And now we're well on our way to getting everything done for a bank mortgage, which is really exciting. Okay, So I kind of wanted to talk about the couple of houses that we saw too. So I said, like, the first one that we saw, it was really close to where I was boarding my horse already, and so we didn't really think about like needing land or anything. Looking back on it, all three houses that we saw before we saw the house that we bought, we're really happy that we didn't get those because they all ended up having issues, you know? So basically, we didn't really have like a checklist. If I had to do it over again, now that I know the process of buying a house, I would 100% make a checklist of everything that we want out of the house, out of the property, what land we want, you know, all those specifics, and make sure that the house that we are looking at is going to meet those specifics and not even bother looking at other houses, because we kind of just were like, oh, well, this is in our, you know, range for price, so we'll just go look at it. But we didn't really think about, well, is it going to fit our needs 10 years from now? Or does it fit our needs now? Like, is it big enough? Or is it too big? Or, you know, is it in good enough shape for us to bother with it? Because we looked at one that we actually almost signed on, and then we found black mold. So don't let the charms of just having a house pull you into just buying a random house or just buying any house because it's what you can afford. Because we did kind of let ourselves get wrapped into that. Like, if you have a, you know, an absolute budget, because you aren't rich, you don't have, you know, you have a good income, or you, like in our case, so it's not just me, it's me and my fiance, so we have two incomes, we have, you know, two good jobs, but that's still not gonna make it enough for us to have a huge budget on a house. So we had a pretty small budget. We also were trying to keep a small budget. At the beginning of looking for houses, I didn't have that checklist. I didn't know what we really needed. All I knew was that we wanted a house. So we didn't really think about it. We were just like, we're just gonna go look at this house. We fell in love with the first house, which honestly, I still really liked that house. And I recently drove past it and somebody did buy it and they're doing construction on it. And that's awesome. I'm really happy to see that. In hindsight, I'm also really happy we did not get that house, because the nightmare of financing on that house was just like not in the cards. Like, I didn't even understand it because I talked to a real estate agent that was on that house. There's no way, because you had to get like 2 different loans for that house because it needed construction before it was livable. So yeah, so whatever. So no thanks. So basically it wasn't eligible for a bank mortgage, so you would have had to do a construction loan and blah blah blah. So kind of like this house, you know, it's not quite ready for a bank mortgage, but we just got lucky. But anyway, so we really liked that house, and again, I didn't have my checklist. If I had had a checklist of things that we needed, I would have automatically known that that was not the house for us. Looking back on it, it would have been really hard to heat, because I think the first time we walked through it, we got lost. So that house was just, I think, too big and windy, so heat would have been an issue for that house, and it had no land whatsoever. Like, houses were packed in like sardines around it, and we do not like that. I grew up on a farm, so I like space, and so does my fiance. So we did not really want to live that close to other people. I think, like, in the long run, it's really good that we didn't get that house for many reasons, because I don't really see that we could have lived there happily for, you know, 30 years. So yeah, so that was that house. And I mean, the house itself, beautiful. If it had been on a different plot of land, honestly, we might have worked a little bit harder to get that house. We found another house, and it was actually like 3 miles away from that house. And it was kind of weird. My fiance had already lived in that house before. He had lived there like years before, as a kid, and so he like knew that house and he really liked that house. But we inspected it really, really well after like the first time that we looked at it. Now this house we actually almost bought, but then we found black mold, so we backed out because we did not want to even touch that with a 10-foot pole. So that was that. We liked that house, we really did, and we literally got that close to buying it, but the mold was a deal breaker for sure. So we were like, nope, gonna back out of that, which, you know, sucked. But also looking back on it, not only was the black mold a deal breaker, but looking back on the house and the property, also did not have enough land for my horse. And now I have 2 horses, and I know honestly for a fact that I would have ended up with 2 horses because I only have 2 because my one needed a friend after I moved her. She got lonely and she did not want to do anything ever. I think she was depressed because she had nobody. So I would have ended up with 2 horses, and there's no way that the 2 first homes that we looked at had space for horses. And then we started thinking about getting a manufactured home, and we looked at a few at dealerships, and then we looked at one that was actually in like a trailer park, but it needed to be moved to make room for a new trailer to get put there. So basically the family had outgrown the trailer and they were trying to sell it, and I think we kind of noticed immediately that that trailer would not fit our needs. It was way too small. The family that was moving out of it had, I think, 2 kids at that time and 1 on the way. And I think for me at least, that was an eye-opener that was just not going to suit us in the long run. There was just no way that we were going to live in that for the rest of our lives. Now, banks will do manufactured home loans for, I think, 10 or 15-year loans. But there's huge requirements for that. Your own land to put the manufactured home on. So that wasn't happening. We did not have our own land. We did not, we weren't going to be able to just buy property. And then you'd have to get a well and you'd have to get septic set up. And so that was not happening. And you have to move the thing. You have to pay to have it moved onto your land. So we did not go for that for, those reasons. Difficulty with getting a loan, and difficulty with moving prices, and difficulty with the fact that it simply was not a big enough one. Because we did look at a few at dealerships that actually were not bad. I actually liked a few of them a lot, but I also didn't really see myself in them in the long run. So, and just moving them and just different things, it was like, honestly, I think we would have spent more money doing that than buying a house that's already on property. So fast forward to the house that we ended up getting, that I'm sitting in. So we found this house in, I think, February or March 2020. Yeah. And we looked at it in March of 2020, and I honestly fell in love with it like the first day that we looked at it. Took pictures, and I think I looked a lot more closely at this house than the other ones, because by then we had seen, I think including all the manufactured homes that we looked at, I think we had looked at 5 different houses. So by the time we got to this house, we sort of had a good idea of a checklist of things that we needed, and we were sort of seeing, the differences in what we really needed. This house checked all of the boxes and made us notice even more things that we wanted or needed that this house had. So this house has a 3-car garage. Actually have a barn on the property as well, but it's not set up for horses. It's like an equipment barn basically. So we have chickens in the barn now. For a while we actually did have our stalls in the barn, but it actually just works out better to use the garage for the horses because we can't use it for equipment anyway. The vehicles don't fit. So it's easier to just have the horses in there. So we honestly didn't even think about having a garage. We didn't think about needing to have a barn. But those are 2 structures that we are really grateful for now because so much more storage and places for the animals to live. This house has 8 acres and it's completely flat. So my horses have a really, really nice sand pasture with an arena right near the pasture, as well as space for jumps. And there's a path to the river, which is right near the pasture. So honestly, it's like picture perfect. And there's really not much I would change about it. Which is really big. When we first looked at the house, I immediately saw where I wanted the pasture and where I wanted the arena and where the horses would live. So that's like a really big deal that I was able to figure that out and see that. We can see ourselves here 30 years from now. And I don't think I saw myself in any of the other houses in the long run. Just like I think that was in the back of my mind and I didn't even realize it, sort of thing. So I'm really happy that we did not go for the first house that we saw. That's like a really big thing. And don't get discouraged about not being able to get the bank loan, because there are always other things that you can do. There's always other options. Now, not every for sale by owner is going to offer owner financing. We got very lucky with that, and we are forever grateful, and we fully understand that that is not, you know, everybody's story, and that's not really normal. But I did want to include it and just let you know that it does happen. It is something that you know, can think about and have some, like, have that in the back of your mind, and maybe like ask about it if you end up having issues. Now, our thing was, I think he was okay with doing it simply because he knew that the issue with us getting a bank mortgage was not that we didn't have enough money or that we didn't have a good credit score. It was just that we didn't have a long enough credit history. Now, if we had had a bad credit score or we had had issues with money, then it probably would have been a different story and he probably wouldn't have offered that to us. So that's another thing to think about. But we are really grateful that we were able to do that. And we love this house, and I will insert pictures of the house and so you guys can see it. And I think that's pretty much it. Buying a house is a big expense. It's probably the biggest one you're ever gonna make if you are in, you know, our shoes and being young, and you need to make sure that it's a house that you see yourself in for years to come. You see yourself having a family here and growing together. So just being sure that it's the house is like the most important thing. So really, make a checklist of your priorities. Make sure that it's not just something that you can pay for, but something that you really want. And be patient if the right house doesn't come along immediately. That's okay. It's probably not going to. It's probably going to take a while. Be persistent. Make sure that, you know, you're always checking those real estate sites, or, you know, checking real estate listings. And a big thing, look for the for sale by owners. Really pay attention to those, because there's no middleman to go through, and you 100% speak to the owner of the house. You get their point of view, and a lot of times there are people that have lived in the house, so you can really ask them what it's like. And I mean, in our case, he was just selling it, but I think a lot of the time it is going to be people that have lived in that house, and they have a very good perspective on what it's like to live there, a lot more than a real estate agent would. Nothing against that, but I think it's just a good idea to think about doing a for sale by owner. You know, we ran into it. People think that you're, you know, young and stupid, you don't have enough money, or, you know, they can pull the wool over your eyes. So working with the person that's actually selling the house, you can really prove yourself and prove that you're not as dumb as they might think. So it's just a good idea. And yeah, just have your checklist. Make sure that you at least have it in your mind, you know, a few things that you want to have, and make sure you get those things. If the house does not have those things and it's not easily, you know, something that you can put into the house, then it's not the house for you. And pay attention to the structure of the house. If the structural integrity of the house is compromised, it's probably not worth trying. Make sure it has good bones, because if it doesn't, then you're going to be in a world of hurt. Getting a house that needs work, that's totally cool. Our house needs work. But make sure that it's in good enough shape that you can live in it, at least. Unless you're looking for a major project, then by all means, go for it.